All right. Um, Good afternoon. Or for those of you on the West Coast, good morning. And welcome to PPERC / the Poor People's Army's International Human Rights Day panel event. It is an honor to have our guest here today. I'm also an honor to have all of the participants who are joining us participating. First, we're going to start with introductions. I'm going to introduce folks. I'll give a little brief summary of who they are, and then if you guys want to say a couple of words about who you are and what you do, that would be great. The first panelist that I'm going to introduce is Cheri Honkala, who of course is a member of the Poor People's Human Rights Campaign. Cheri, thank you for joining us. Did you want to say a few words just to sort of get us, kicked off?
I just want to say it's International Human Rights Day, and I'm excited to have such an amazing panel today. That's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Cheri. Next, we have a representative and chairman of the Second Rainbow Coalition, also the author of My Search for Truth, Answers, and Meaning. I hope I got that order correct. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But please give a warm welcome to Kwame Shakur. Kwame.
Pleasure to be on here. It's My Search for Answers, Truth, and Meaning, the autobiography of Kwame Shakur, but you pretty much got it. But it's a pleasure to be on here with all these distinguished guest panelists on here. I had to Google everybody on here and realize that I'm the only one that ain't on Wikipedia. So I'm honored to be on here with y'all brothers and sisters that's doing a lot of great work out here. So I wanted to plug all of y'all to let everybody know that this is an important panel discussion today with serious people. So it's a pleasure and honor for y'all to have me on here with y'all.
So for any of our audience members that do that type of work, please get this man up on Wikipedia. There's absolutely no excuse for him not to be up there. Our next introduction, we're not going to say Miss. We're just going to say the powerful Loretta Ross. Please introduce yourself. And if you have any products to share with us, don't hesitate to do that as well. Books, shirts, all that. Loretta, you're muted.
Yeah, I got muted by the host, I think. But anyway, my name's Loretta Ross. I am basically in Atlanta, though I'm temporarily in Massachusetts. And I've been a lifelong Black radical feminist for the last 50 years. And it's an honor to be with y'all and to celebrate Human Rights Day. And I just want to call into this space two of my human rights heroes, Reverend C.T. Vivian and Shulamith Koenig, because we want to honor them. They have passed, they've joined the ancestors, but we stand on the shoulders of giants like that.
Thank you very much, Loretta. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you. We had two other speakers, one of whom was here, but I think had to step away. Ajamu Baraka, who of course is the national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace. I don't know if Ajamu is back. Ajamu, are you? No, that's all right.
There he is.
Oh, there he is. Okay, Ajamu, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank the organizers for this very important conversation. My name is Ajamu Baraka. I'm the national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace. And as Loretta has called into this space, let me also acknowledge who we have already in this space that for me are human rights heroes, people who have been fundamental in bringing this framework to the activist community in this country and around the world. And that is my leaders, Cheri Honkala and Loretta Ross. Between those two and the Shrike process back in the 90s, people need to understand that this common use of the term of human rights wasn't something that just automatically emerged. It came as a consequence of real work, real struggle. And both of these women were in the forefront of that work. And I'm just honored to be a part of to be part of their orbit and to be part of the conversation today with the activists who are on this panel this afternoon. So thank you.
Thank you, Ajamu. Appreciate having you. And I think, you brought some really important points to the forefront. International Human Rights Day, at least historically, sort of emerged post World War II. But the fight for what it has really meant, and its actual implementation, particularly here, in the United States, has been an ongoing struggle. It still is not clear that housing is a human right. It still is not clear that education is a human right. It still is not clear that a basic meal is a human right. And so it is a real honor and a pleasure and an opportunity for us to dig in, to get deep into this discussion, and to expand our hearts, our minds, and our spirits today. So let's hop right into it. We're gonna start with Loretta. So Loretta, first question for you is, what is your understanding of the history of the women's movement and its fight to embrace human rights in the discourse, as well as the struggle to get the human rights movement to embrace the women's movement in the discourse, so to bring those two things together? I'll pass it over to you. And take as much time as you need.
I probably have to start with the personal story, because when the United Nations declared the World Decade for Women, launching its first World Conference for Women in Mexico City in 1975, the second conference in Copenhagen, the third conference in Nairobi, Kenya in 1985, and then the Beijing conference in 1995, it brought the women's movement globally into conversation about using the human rights framework. And Gabriela in the Philippines are the ones that coined the phrase women's rights are human rights, even though Hillary Clinton was more famous for saying it, with that attributing it to the anti-Marcos struggle of the Philippines, that where Gabriela had located human rights. But it's been a task to get the women's movement in the United States to listen to women from the global South and really recognize the importance of moving beyond the individualized liberal definitions of human rights and to go into the more collective global understanding of human rights, particularly acknowledging economic, social, cultural, environmental, sexual, and developmental human rights. But what I was lucky enough to be a part of was beginning in the early 1990s, a group of women of color, people like Jaribu Hill, Prashanti Damaraj, myself, a number of us decided that we were going to bring human rights home based on our activism and global solidarity work we were doing, because as we traveled around the world, meeting with women from the global South, they would almost to a voice say, we don't need you coming over here trying to fix our countries. We need you to get the United States boot off of our neck. And so that required us to really center working on anti-imperialist work within our solidarity work and really focusing on the achievement of human rights, both domestically and internationally, by focusing on the US. So what I did particularly was in 1995, I founded the National Center for Human Rights Education, along with Reverend C.T. Vivian, Abdullahi Nahim from the Sudan, and Shulamith Kernick, who was an Israeli American who had worked on behalf of Palestinians. And the four of us spent the next decade focusing on teaching the social justice movement to use the human rights framework. In that decade, we passed out 1 million copies of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, after we did a survey and found that only 7% of the American public had even heard of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And we needed human rights education because people can't fight for rights they don't know they have. And the United States government takes advantage of this manufactured ignorance among the American people. And so that's been the site of my work. And now we are now seeing the normalization of human rights discourse within the social justice movement. But Ajamu is right. There was a period that was not normal. But I also want to close by saying we're just standing on the shoulders of people who came before us, because the first time human rights was invoked by the Black Freedoms Movement was 1858, when Frederick Douglass declared the lynching of a Black man in New York City a human rights violation. And that was 90 years before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So if you go from Malcolm X to Martin Luther King to Audre Lorde to Tony Cade, there's been a long legacy of Black freedom fighters demanding the use of the human rights framework, not only politically and legally, but morally, to define what every human being is entitled to and where we have to fight to make our non-performing, non-compliant country respect the power of the people to demand and achieve our human rights. And so now we talk about abortion as a human right, and the right to have your children, reproductive justice is a whole human rights-based framework. We use the human rights framework in the women's movement, but it's been very slow to get the mainstream, predominantly white movement to understand the power of human rights, because they're blinded in many ways by their white liberalism. But I don't want to understate the power of women of color who really transformed and made a commitment in the 1990s to challenge the leading human rights organizations like Amnesty and Human Rights Watch and stuff, who focused on civil and political rights, but weren't willing to bring human rights home to challenge the hegemony of the United States in committing human rights violations around the world and domestically. And so this is where we are. And let me shut up and pass the mic to the next speaker.
And Loretta, you have plenty of time. So if there's anything else you want to add, definitely feel free. But thank you.
Let me circle back around. I want to hear what everybody else has to say.
Understood. I do want to take a brief moment to say that we do have Poor People's Army's sweatshirts available, $25. Oh, thank you. I didn't realize my video wasn't on. Thank you very much. $25 per sweatshirt. Cheri's got them. You can see them right there. It's just they're green and they're very nice. All right, so we're gonna go to our next speaker, and that will be Ajamu. Ajamu, what is the history of the struggle for economic, social, and cultural human rights in the U.S.? And I don't want to take this for granted. Maybe you also could help give us like a definition or help outline the framework for us, because I know all of our panelists may know what it is, but I don't want to assume everyone in the audience does. So I will pass that over to you. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you. And let me start this way. That the struggle for economic, social, and cultural rights is as old as the establishment of this settler colonial project. Because at the center of that idea is that for people to have human dignity, they need to be able to experience life in a certain way. They need to have the ability to house and clothe themselves, to have access to food, to have their culture acknowledged and be allowed to practice their culture. That their societies that they build are societies that reflect their values and their independence in order to develop along lines that they see fit for themselves. Now, we say from the very beginning of this nation, because the nature of this project in the U.S. is a project in which those fundamental rights were never realized, because the very establishment of this nation as a settler colonial project had embedded in that reality the systemic undermining of human dignity. The very fact that this is as a colonial project, it meant that other human beings who were now part of the original European population, that their value as human beings, in fact, their status as human beings were in fact questioned, in fact rejected, not just a question, but rejected. The whole concept of the doctrine of discovery is based on the distorted notion that the millions of people who occupied this territory were basically non-human, and that Europeans were in the process of quote unquote discovery, and that these human beings who were here had no rights that any European needed to respect. And with the slave trade that was accelerated in North America, with the importation of Africans from the African continent, or people who became Africans, you have the indigenous land, African labor, that became the foundation for the material reality that we refer to today as Europe, as Western Europe. So at the center of this process is the fundamental denial of human dignity. And so this struggle to reverse that, to eliminate those oppressive social relationships, has been at the center of the anti-colonial movement. And part of that fight to destroy this colonial imperialist system has been an alternative ethical framework that some people refer to as human rights. Now, let me just say this at this point. I think it's important to say that there's no one human rights framework. There's one hegemonic human rights framework, which is the liberal framework that is a framework that developed over time, that was codified in some ways after the end of the Second Imperialist War that we know as World War II, reflected in the United Nations. And the first major document that was produced was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Very important. In fact, some people may say revolutionary of development. But when you dig a little bit deeper into that, you'll find that even that was a compromise between two systems in competition. And in that document, you had two perspectives on the liberal framework, or the framework of human rights. You had the Western nations that upheld so-called civil and political rights, the right to assemble, free speech, access to information, participate in governance, et cetera, versus the East that put an emphasis on those rights that people needed to have in order to live a dignified life, a living wage, to be free of pollutants that would undermine your health, the right to universal health, the right to housing, the right to food, and all of the things that ensured your material reproduction. So these were reflected in that. But as we have seen over time, as the anti-colonial movement has developed, we've had further developments of what we refer to as human rights. Some of us have been working quite some time in systematizing what we refer to as the Black radical traditional human rights. We call that the people-centered human rights framework, a framework that is not dependent on those rights that are developed and struggled around being developed by states necessarily. That it's a framework that transcends the individualism of the liberal framework, that does not just engage in quote unquote advocacy for the recognition of rights, but recognizes that the real source of human rights, people-centered human rights, are not states, not legal frameworks, not even the treaties, as important as those treaties are. the source of a framework of human rights informed by new ethics is in fact the people in struggle, the people in formation. So we say people-centered human rights is the revolutionary development of the human rights framework, a development that says that we're not going to be able to realize the full range of anything called human rights until we overthrow basically those structures, those institutions that are responsible for the exploitation and oppression that's part of the DNA of this global colonial capitalist system. So we don't pretend that human rights are neutral or objective. We understand that if they're going to have value, they have to be part of this struggle, this revolutionary process. So we see it as a part of a political project. Okay, and we name the enemy of human rights. And for us, the enemy of human rights are those forces that emerged in 1492, the pan-European white supremacist colonial capitalist patriarchy. Those forces represent the enemy of human rights. And until we overthrow that process, until we institute real democracy, real authentic self-determination, then we just sort of, playing games in terms of human rights and what is real possibilities might be.
Wow, thank you. I'm kind of tripped out right now. I'm glad we got that recorded. So, Brother Kwame, you got to follow that. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Brother Kwame, your question. Why does so first off, for those of you who don't know, Kwame is a representative and the chairman of the current Second Rainbow Coalition, which is anchored by a variety of organizations, including some of the original organizations like the Young Patriots, High Thurman, of course, being a member. Kwame, tell us, why does the fight for human rights, as sort of laid out by some of our previous panelists, why does it need to be a Rainbow Coalition? And of course, tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing right now as well. So pass it over to you.
It's really a good segue from what Ajamu was just speaking about, because a lot of people familiar with the Black Liberation Movement starting with the Black Panther Party in 1966 when Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale established the original Black Panther Party. But when we fast forward to April 4th, 1969, and we saw what the climax to me of what the Black Liberation Movement was headed towards with the human rights center piece that Ajamu was talking about, the Rainbow Coalition was a fundamental change in recognizing how to organize people around these human rights issues. You know what I mean? From the wretched of the earth, the ones at the bottom, as Franz Fanon would call us. You know what I'm saying? And understanding in the context that we was fighting on a international, intercommunal level of organizing people around this against this system. You know what I mean? And I think that was a very big transformation in the trajectory of this country and stuff when it came to organizing and fighting for human rights and waging this class struggle. And if you think about it, I always speak about the origins of this white supremacy with the Bacon's Rebellion, when it was institutionalized in a way where white supremacy was a tool to keep the bottom divided against itself. And it's been going on all the way up to the present day. So the first Rainbow Coalition, when Fred Hampton brought together the Black Panthers, Young Patriots organizations, young Lords and Brown Berets, American Indian Movement, Red Guard, and all these different organizations, they were breaking free from what the United States government has always tried to prevent us from ever establishing to be the biggest threat to their division of using white supremacy as a tool of division. So the Second Rainbow Coalition, we came together around a programmatic unity. It was a realistic basis that is historically established in time that we realized we could adapt to our times today. And the basis of it is based on the human rights platform with a class analysis to it. When you think about the 10-point program of the Black Panther Party, and we worked with the March 29th, 1972 version of it, because this is when Black Panther Party took a radical leap in their class analysis. But I want to mention some of these points, because these are all human rights points, you know what I mean, that they were speaking about. And like Huey said, it wasn't a radical, it wasn't revolutionary, nor was it reform. He said these are survival programs pending revolution that was established and within the basis of this 10-point program. But he said, number one, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of the Black community. He said, two, we want full employment for our people. He said, three, we want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of the Black and oppressed community. He said, four, we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. He said, five, we want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decading American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present day society. He said, six, we want completely free healthcare for all Black and oppressed people. He said, seven, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people and other people of color, all oppressed people inside the United States. He said, eight, we want immediate end to all wars of aggression. Number nine, we want freedom for all Black and poor oppressed people now held in U.S., federal, state, county, city, military prisons, and jails. We want trials by a jury of peers for all persons charged with so-called crimes under the laws of this country. And 10, he said, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, peace, and people's community control of modern technology. Now, these points, the original Black Panther Party, Young Lords, Young Patriots Organization, Brown Berets, etc., they institutionalized this in their community. This was a form of establishing dual and contending power. Institutions within our community that we take a hold of, that the people representative of a new society in the making that stands in opposition to these capitalist institutions of the same in our community. So this was one of the ways that the Black Panther Party and the First Rainbow Coalition was showing that when we fighting for self-determination, we have to institutionalize revolution within our community. You dig what I'm saying? And it's going to be a protracted struggle as we organize with other oppressed communities that's seeking self-determination within their community. So this is pretty much what we're advocating for. It's not a monolithic, like Ajamu said, framework of how we approach human rights and how we organize, because we all coming at this to defeat this capitalist imperialist system. You dig what I'm saying? And I think all these ways that we organize is instrumental and integral to us accomplishing this overall mission. And that's what we're trying to set out. We're a new coalition. We just refounded this May 14, 2021. A lot of the organizations in this embryonic development, but bringing the coalition together like this helps us to develop us as a whole. You dig what I'm saying? So if the Poor People's Army specializes in housing takeovers, which we salute them for, other groups within the coalition can learn how to apply some of those same strategies and tactics. If the Brown Berets is great at defense training, you dig what I'm saying? Those are type of skills that all individuals within the coalition can learn from. If the Young Lords is been terrific at creating programs to serve the people programs, then we want to institute those and teach other ones within the coalition how to do so. So this is the basis of what the Second Rainbow Coalition is about. And we look forward to working with all revolutionaries going forward so we can accomplish our main objective, and this defeating capitalism. You dig what I'm saying? And neo-colonialism and all the isms that's dividing the people around the world.
Right on. All right. Didn't seem to have a problem following at all. Okay. Thank you very much, Brother Kwame. So now we are going to we're going to move to our last panelist. And then for our next section, if any of our panelists have any follow-up pieces or things that they want to add based on what other folks have said, questions for other panelists, or I might have questions for panelists, and then we're going to go into the audience Q&A. Cheri, the fight for human rights at a time when humans are no longer even necessary or required. We know automation and artificial intelligence is advancing rapidly. San Francisco just unveiled RoboCop and basically said it can't kill you. So, what are your thoughts on human rights at a time when we don't even need humans? We do need you to unmute though. That is important.
Sorry. Okay, so what does that mean? I'm not a human rights scholar, but I've been fighting for human rights my whole existence and my whole life. Before I get to that answer, just this week, a 7-year-old little girl burned to death in a house on my side of the street, on Custer Street in Kensington. Yesterday, the police were stationed outside my house all day because there was a dead body that was found next door due to a homicide. Every night that I go to sleep, there's helicopters above. I feel like one of those Vietnam movies. I'm aware of the fact that not only are we dealing with fascism and life has become absolutely expendable. They announced, on CNN or whatever, that life expectancy has gone down the most since World War II. They said number 1 was COVID, 2 overdoses, 3 suicide and homicide. And I just know that I live in a war zone similar to many other people across this country. We in the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, and now what's being called an important element of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign is the Poor People's Army, because we are dealing with a wartime situation here. And even though more people have died now as a result of the opiate crisis than died during Vietnam, well, you don't see anybody masses in the street anymore trying to do anything other than like the Black Alliance for Peace. But you don't see masses in the streets like during Vietnam for the more people that have died from the opiate crisis. But how the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign came to use a human rights framework. I too want to lift up Shula and C.T. Vivian and all the brothers and sisters that have gone before us that we've learned something from. But all we knew is that I met a bunch of people that were homeless. They didn't have any place to live, and they couldn't fit into my house. And so we walked to Harrisburg. We walked 22 miles every day for 7 days. And we walked in the rain, we walked in the sun, all of those kinds of things. And when we got to Harrisburg, our capital, we set up in the Capitol. And then while we were in the Capitol, they changed that it was no longer a public building. They changed the hours. And so they had a closing time. And so the day that they did that, we scheduled a tour of the governor's mansion. And we went down to the governor's mansion, and the homeless families were able to see that the dogs lived better than the homeless families. And while we were down there, they removed all of our stuff. And when we came back, they carried us out. We were on the stairs of the Capitol. And while we were there, we set up a tent, and the tent said, "There by the grace of God go I." And while we were living out there in the tent, the governor at the time ordered the removal of the tent. And so we got blankets from people from all over Harrisburg, because they thought it was horrible that kids and women would be out there on the Capitol stairs. But that night, it was the coldest night in October, the governor ordered the removal of the blankets. And so we had to teach the children and everybody how to walk through the night so that people didn't die from hypothermia. So we went to Sheetz grocery store and begged them for cardboard and plastic and wrapped everybody in the cardboard and plastic. And we walked so that people wouldn't freeze to death. None of us had any money whatsoever. Any money that we had totally depleted. And, you know, it was that evening that we realized that the dogs had better accommodations, and that none of the women and children or anybody mattered at that point. That's when we said we felt like we were less than human beings. And that's how we came to use a human rights framework. And that's how I think with the large numbers of people that are being permanently replaced by electronics and technology, that understand that, you know, there is no saviors that are coming to get the folks that are, you know, the children and the families that are still living in cages on the border, to large numbers of African Americans that have been living their whole lives behind prison bars, that at the end of the day, the most important thing that we have is ourself in this process. And so after we had that experience at the Capitol Rotunda, then we wanted to learn, how do you organize massive numbers of people that have absolutely no money? And how come when you flew into, when we would use our rent money and we would fly internationally, right? Other groups coming from like Brazil or other places of the world, they would get like scholarships, but we would use our rent money because we thought it was important that we would participate in conversation with our brothers and sisters in other parts of the world. And we did the same when we participated in the World Court for Women. You know, there was this idea that if you were coming from the US, you were coming with money. And so we would, you know, use our own rent money or whatever to be a part of that international process. And the thing that was instrumental for us in that process was using the photographs of Harvey Finkel and using video. And so that we were able to show people pictures and they would say, oh, that must be Haiti. That must be, you know, someplace in Mexico or Brazil or whatever. And we say, no, this is Kensington. So those things were absolutely instrumental. And so then we thought it was important that we learn from the international community, in particular from the Zapatistas, on how do you organize with large numbers of people that have no money. We knew that we weren't going to just be able to write a foundation grant and find freedom or a way to feed, clothe, and house people. And so we began to try and teach people what was economic, social, and cultural rights. And we took a bus around the entire country and met with C.T. Vivian. And, you know, all of that is documented in a documentary called Outriders. The reason I'm saying all of these things is because It's been a long, hard process that we've gone through. And we're, sadly watching, the enemy, when they know that you're doing something that's effective, they do a good job in trying to make you disappear. And so we're kind of going through a disappearing stage, and we're fighting for people to know, we're not only just here, we're expanding bigger than we've ever been in our life. Right now, we are taking over houses on a regular basis, teaching people across the entire country how to feed, clothe, and house themselves. And we know that at any given moment, many of our leadership can just be made to not just figuratively, but literally disappear in this process. We're modern day fugitives. And this is real. There isn't really a domestic human rights defenders apparatus. And yet our work is incredibly important, because while many talk about human rights, we are busy. I think DuBois said it best. I don't know who said it best, but we know based on this same people-centered human rights model that Ajamu talks about, is that the only way that we're going to get human rights is if we begin to reclaim land, or not even reclaim land, if we take land, take housing, take food, and take back the basic necessities of life, and keep people alive, and build them into the revolutionary leaders that they need to be. And, build that those international relationships that we need to build. And if we begin to speak the truth about the inhumane conditions. And the last thing I'll say, because I could talk forever, we all know this, is that the most important thing about all of these human rights violations that are happening in this country is just like the 7-year-old on the block that died in the house fire, and the guy that was shot and found in the house next door, and the people that die from health care issues and overdoses and suicides, and housing. All of those are all preventable. We have a system that doesn't give a damn about any one of us, and it's growing daily. And it's real, and it's incredibly dangerous. And gone are the days where we can just talk about it. We have to get busy implementing human rights in this country. Thanks.
Wow, thank you, Cheri. Okay, so we have about 12, 13 minutes before we move into our audience sort of driven section. So do any of the panelists want to follow up on anything they said or any of the other panelists said, or any questions for any of the other panelists? So open discussion for you all.
One of the issues that those of us who promote the human rights framework encounters is a lot of skepticism by the left. I'm not even talking about the right. I'm talking about the critics and the skeptics on the left who don't believe in the power of human rights because of its distortion by the liberal governments of the West, and to continue their imperialist manipulation of the framework. And so I'd like perhaps others to speak about how they handle the skeptics, the naysayers, and the critics who criticize the human rights framework without even fully understanding it or even attempt to implement it.
Thank you, Ms. Loretta. All right, so the floor is open if anyone wants to jump on that one.
Well, I would offer.
I know you would.
Some comment.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead. Chopping at
Well, it's been a long struggle around that. I mean, when we were doing the work and trying to demonstrate to people that the framework, as we understood it, as it had emerged at that time, had relevance and value. There was pushback and pushback significantly from the left because it was seen, the framework was seen as they didn't understand a couple of things. One, I don't think left forces really completely understand the primary relevance of the ideological struggle. Okay.
Can you put your microphone down?
Oh, sorry about that. That one of the reasons why we encountered pushback from the left was that one of the, I think, limitations of left forces, in particular in the U.S., is that they never really understood or appreciate the primary importance of the ideological struggle. They didn't also understand that as part of that ideological struggle, you had to have a counter ethical, hegemonic, to use some fancy words, framework that you had to challenge the values of the system, the values that for many seem to reflect common sense, that were in fact natural. And so we said that the human rights framework provided an instrument to push back on those normalized values and to help to expose the contradictions of the liberal philosophical commitment to what they called human rights. Because when what Malcolm said was that, if you want to really elevate the struggle in the US, you had to go from a constitutional struggle to a human rights struggle, because we're all human beings. And then when you look at it in those terms, then you have to begin to define what is it that we have in common as human beings that helps to explain why so many of us are struggling, why so many of us are unable to live dignified lives. And that then leads you, if you are honest, it leads you to a critique of how society and how the planet is organized economically, politically, and socially. So, what that then leads us to is this, in terms of political strategy, explaining to left forces the importance of an alternative ethical framework, but also going further and saying that the kind of human rights that we want to advance are human rights that take us beyond the present system, that not only reflect aspirations for how people should live, how people should govern themselves. That this kind of approach to human rights is an approach in which human rights are decolonized, and they become a more important instrument for those of us who are fighting for radical fundamental change. And that if you understand that the end point has to be seizing of power in order for us to transform ourselves and the system, then you understand that we have to have appeals that make sense to folks and a vision that makes sense to folks. So that is how some of us have to push back on this. That basically we have a vision and we have a understanding what it takes to realize that vision, and that is to build a revolutionary movement here in this country.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Kwame.
I would say, I've been out of prison it'd be 7 years in March. When I got out, I saw the disorganization amongst the left that really surprised me. I thought I was coming back out to a society where the left was a lot more organized, a lot more advanced. But one of the things I was realizing is that it was a lot of purists out here that was very dogmatic, you know what I mean? And being a dialectical materialist that sees contradictions and everything and understand how to work to resolve contradictions, I realized that building programmatic unity was the start of establishing solidarity with various oppressed communities. Like I said, the Black Panther Party had a big influence on me when they explained that the survival programs were survival programs. That's what it was, pending revolution. You know, and that basis of unity that they established with the other oppressed communities was a realistic way to build unity while actually also having those political ideological struggles behind closed doors as we progress together. You dig what I'm saying? But that's one thing I saw in the left when I got out is that without naming different groups and putting them out there like that, hopefully they learn through our observation and participation. What the original Black Panther Party said, this is the best way people learn, because a lot of people didn't think this type of stuff could be accomplished, but now we're proving with these intercommunal solidarity that we've been establishing with different communities that it can be done. You know what I mean? Even having an alliance. I remember when people was like, man, you can't organize street organizations, you know what I mean? But we got an alliance with the almighty vice coordination. You know what I mean? Something that I saw that Fred Hampton and Martin Luther King did. So some people have to learn through observation and participation. It's they get so caught up in abstract ways of looking at things that they don't see how concretely it's all about building relationships with different individuals and communities. That's the basis of building the united front that's going to help wage this struggle going forward. It's not going to be purist ways of looking at stuff. Yeah, I'm a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist. Proud about it, happy about it. But I won't allow that to be something to divide me against any of my brothers as maybe revolutionary nationalists or Pan-Africanists or anarchists or whatever that may be, even democratic socialists. You know what I'm saying? Working within a framework of recognizing that we are fighting a common enemy, and we cannot allow political ideological differences become the reason to divide us against each other. You know what I'm saying? So I'm showing people that no matter what our political ideological line is, we can work together to organize around some of these concrete conditions that we all say is a problem of this system. You know what I'm saying? But behind closed doors, we have those political ideological struggles to help us work through the differences that we may have. You know what I'm saying? Because even when we come to power, we're not all going to monolithically think the same. You know, that's why we're going to have a Congress. You know what I mean? That's why we're going to have people, assemblies right there, boots on the ground, right there in our community to show real democracy to ways through some of these struggles and stuff. But that's been one of my ways to disprove a lot of ones in the left is showing people through the practice and the actual results. When they see actual results by the observation and participation, they tend to become believers and want to join on with what we're doing.
All right, so we're gonna go to Cheri, and then I want to read a couple of comments from the audience, and then we're gonna go into the audience Q&A participation section. So Cheri, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, who's ever moderating, if they could let a sister's mic turned on or whatever. Jaribo Hill just joined us. She's one of those pioneers that we were lifting up earlier to say a couple words. Hi, Jaribo. We can't hear you, Jaribo.
Hi, Cheri. I really was just joining to show support. Sorry, I'm late.
Okay, no.
In another session.
Give us a couple words of wisdom.
Well, just solidarity to everyone. Hey, Loretta.
Hey,
Wow. Ajamu, Cheri, we've been on this road a long time, and many of you are my teachers, certainly my mentors in the fight for human rights and justice. We're here in the Deep South, as you know, in the belly of the beast in Mississippi, and the leadership that you all have provided over the years has certainly provided some strength and some integrity and some courage for the work that we are trying to do. I want to make sure folks know to hold the date, December 8th to the 10th. We're back in business with Schrock after the hiatus, the forced upon us hiatus. So we'll be contacting everyone. We're going to be in Nashville, December 8th to the 10th. And I got my panel right here. I'm looking at people who are going to be on that panel. So I hope to talk to you soon. Take care, and I'll be listening in throughout for the rest of the program.
Awesome.
Karibu, tell them what Schrock is, because not a lot of people know.
Good point. Good point, my teacher. The Southern Human Rights Organizers Conference was founded in 1996. And up until COVID, we were convening every other year in a different Southern city to bring together human rights and social justice defenders to strategize and to lift up important work throughout the region. So once again, we're going to be December 8th to the 10th. We will be in Nashville, December 8th to the 10th, 2023. We'll be in Nashville. So thanks for the shout out. Thanks for the notice. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Can I say something real
sure.
quick?
Oh yeah, go ahead, John.
To echo the commentary about the centering of practice, that and how we push back, if you will, against those forces that are really good at rapping, but not really doing much work. So one of the things that happened in the 1990s was that those elements that I think represented, if you will, the left of the human rights world, weren't just talking, but started building. It started through practice to demonstrate the value of the framework and as it evolved. So you had, and it's so important that we have these elements here on this panel, because I really believe that there was three interlocking sort of developments that really helped to elevate this framework. The Poor People's Campaign bus tour, the establishment and the training of the National Center for Human Rights Education, and the Schrock process. It was all interconnected. All of the leading lights, if you will, of the human rights framework today, they got their start in that process. I like to think that I played a little bit of a role in that, in terms of the base that I had with Amnesty International in the South, and being able to move some resources and this and that. But all of these things came together that provided the organizational foundation that resulted in people embracing and using this framework. The thousands of people who were trained through the center, the activism, the conferences, that was the foundation for those of us who understood the importance and the value and the potential of this framework, to demonstrate through just doing it what that value and potential was.
I just wanted to speak up and say that after a decade of running the center, I moved on and helped found Sister Song, our Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. So I moved my site of work. And a few years after I left NCHRE, it didn't exist anymore because of a lot of reasons. But I took my grief around the collapse of NCHRE to Reverend C.T. Vivian, and he offered me really wise counsel. He said, Loretta, organizations come and go. It's the movement that's forever. And he said, you're going to be doing human rights education everywhere you go for the rest of your life. And he helped me understand that everywhere I've been since those 1990s, I make sure that there's a human rights component in my work on reproductive justice, in my class at Smith, teaching about white supremacy. I'm actually trying to start an undergraduate degree program now at Smith, so that we could have some young people actually trained to deal with the interlocking and interconnected human rights framework, so that they can get out of their silos and have a vision of what they're fighting for, and not just what they're fighting against. And Upendra Bakshi really Indian human rights scholar really summed it up for me. He said, the people who have the least in life are the ones who need the most from human rights. And we have to keep them in the center of our lens. We can't listen to the people whose human rights aren't being violated, naysaying and poo-pooing the framework. It's when we did human rights education, it was the homeless people walking in off the street, coming to the Georgia Hill Library with the little blue book in their hand saying, they wrote this for me, kind of thing. And that's how we have to focus and keep in the center of our lens and not listen to all of the, yep, there it is, not listen to all the skeptics, the critics, and the naysayers who don't believe in the vision and the power of humanity coming together. And another thing I'll say is, for me, how we do the work is as important as the work that we do. So we can't do work against racism in a homophobic way. We can't do work against, transphobia in a misogynist way. We can't, and so that is also the power of the human rights work, because human rights is our clarion call, it's our connective tissue, it's our vision for the future. And it's a very important side of struggle that gets poo-pooed by a whole lot of people who think they know everything, but they couldn't even tell you all the categories of human rights they were all fighting for.
Thank you very much, Loretta. I want to take a moment to lift up a couple of comments, and then we're going to go into the questions. Kind of earlier on, we had Captain Z staying in the city of Chicago using police and garbage trucks systemically destroying tent encampments as soon as the occupants are absent. It's a death sentence. Also, Che, all of our struggles are interconnected. The struggle we wage on the streets are reflections of the struggle our brothers and sisters are waging in the prisons and jail. Quick note, while I'm doing this, if somebody could drop the link to donate, because we are, of course, an organization who needs all of the support that we can get. So if you could, spare a $10 sustaining donation, or even a $5 sustaining donation, or even a $25 sustaining donation, we would be grateful. And don't forget, we also have the Poor People's Army sweatshirts. Boom. There is Cheri, Miss Cheri rocking those. If you don't have one, get one now. So the last comment here, Captain Z, capital is antithetical to human rights. So with that, it's about 12:06. We're going to move into the Q&A. Here we have Sam Michael with a question for the panel. Do we believe in addressing climate change? The geological evidence demonstrates that climate change disproportionately impacts those in poverty. So I believe that this issue is extremely connected to class. If we do believe in addressing climate change, then what are we going to do? And how would we build a green environment while opposing capitalism? So who wants to tackle that one first? I can call you out. I got no problem calling people out, just so you know. So somebody better volunteer, because I will point.
No, you ain't calling us out. You're calling us in now.
There you go. There you go, Loretta. There you go. Let me know. Let me know. Anyone?
Well, I mean, I think
Right.
just two sentences about this. I mean, those of us that live in the poorest areas in the country, we're the ones that live on the Superfund sites. We're the ones that our kids, when they're born, go to the asthma section of the hospital. We have the highest cancer rates. You could just list one thing after another. So, I mean, we definitely can't ignore the issue. We used to look internationally and think that climate refugees was something for somebody in some other part of the world. Now it's like now it's a regular thing here. And we definitely know, where this country is headed in the years to come in terms of the different sections of the population that are being hit over and over again by various different storms, and the folks that are being permanently displaced. So, I mean, I see it as like the same as fighting for, I mean, I was going to say fighting for food, but food is a climate issue as well. So there's no way around it. It has to be embraced like everything else. Our folks are already suffering because, like it's really super cold, and, in different parts of the country, the gas company hires the gas company to go out and shut people's heat off before the moratorium, and then people end up freezing to death. And we say that people freeze to death because they didn't have gas on or whatever in their house. No, they died because they didn't have a right to have gas on in the house. And so all of these things are basic human rights.
Thank you, Cheri. Anybody else want to take that one?
Well, one of the things that people can be confused about is that they try to create a hierarchy of human rights. Like, if you don't take care of the planet, then why would you fight for the end to gun violence? If you don't take care of this, why did you do that? And they don't realize how all of these human rights are interconnected, universal, and really, the freedom of speech means nothing if all you can say is you're hungry. I mean, we have to teach people how to fight for undivided human rights instead of playing that hierarchy game of white supremacy and pitting rights against each other, which ends up pitting people against each other. And as long as we remain the divided and the conquered, then they laugh all the way to the bank while they continue to profit from our oppression. And so part of our job is to teach the people most affected by these human rights violations what they have in common with other people who are affected by human rights violations, even as they may focus on different things.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead, John. I saw you. Go ahead, man.
Exactly. And that those things that we have in common is that the denial of dignity, the denial of rights emanate from some common sources. And that common source is the way in which the societies and the planet is organized in terms of how we produce for ourselves, who owns the products of what we produce. Why we have a system that results in some people living enormously prosperous lives, while the vast majority of us live in misery and poverty. And so you trace this back to that common theme, and that common theme is, and I think someone said it in the chat, the incompatibility of any notion of human rights and the continued existence of this colonial capitalist system. That, once we get focused on the genesis of the source of the violations of human dignity, then it helps us to create that programmatic unity that Brother Kwame was talking about, that provides the unity of action toward the common realization of political objectives. And those political objectives, again, has to be the radical transformation of societies and the planet. We can't poo-poo that because we use reformism as part of the ideological struggle, but we don't end there, because then we become reformists. We say that we use reformism to sharpen the contradictions, to expose the contradictions, as part of this attempt to build radical consciousness, so people understand that we've got to go beyond this system. See, I think we're at a critical historical moment that if we're not being absolutely clear in our language, if we're not advancing a framework that helps people to understand in very real ways why they are suffering the way they are, that it is connected to how societies are organized, then we are inadvertently providing ideological ammunition to the enemy, that we are perpetuating relationships that, as long as they continue, they will result in the kinds of conditions that we find ourselves facing today. So, while it will sometimes make some of us seem to be fringed, on the margins, our dear sister Bell Hooks talked about the margins being a place of value, a perspective that one needs to operate from in order to see the entire terrain. So those of us who are on the margins today will be at the center, because there's a certain kind of logic in place here that's unsustainable. The capitalist logic is unsustainable. That's why these pigs are engaged in the kind of activity they're engaged in right now. They have completely rejected and jettisoned notions of human rights. They use it rhetorically. The U.S. being the #1 violator of human rights on the planet, they will play like they are connected to or committed to it. But they have decided that the only way they maintain themselves is through force and violence, and that's exposing their contradictions and helping us, with building the radical and revolutionary consciousness we have to raise. So, this is, I think, the challenge we have to really embrace. That basically, understanding that we use the human rights framework as it presently exists, but we also remind ourselves that the human rights framework itself is a form of contestation. That we use it, but we are contesting it because it has its limitations, the traditional way. And so we look at and we say that people-centered human rights, for example, also includes the rights of Mother Earth. We have a situation now where the biodiversity of the earth is being destroyed as a consequence of industrial capitalism. Species are being eliminated across the planet. So we say that part of the human rights framework is also a framework that recognizes and embraces the rights of Mother Earth. That doesn't have to come from a treaty. That comes from our practical experiences, our struggle. And we say this is part of the human rights framework emanating from the people.
Can I just speak up too, because I wanted to just emphasize, we who believe in human rights, we understand that human rights is the language of hope. It's a clear, unflinching look of what is, but it's also the promise of what can be. And in many ways, the people who are opposed to human rights mistakenly think that they're fighting us, the human rights movement. But I think they are overmatched, because what they're really fighting is truth. They're fighting time. They're fighting history. And they're fighting evidence. And truth, time, history, and evidence is going to kick their ass. No group of people can ever fight those forces. So we hold the winning hand. We've got truth, time, evidence, and history on our side. If we don't give up hope that we are going to win, we need to plan for winning. We need to plan to use this truth, time, evidence hand that we have, and not disintegrate ourselves by, with the cannibalization of the call-out culture, so that we don't understand how to successfully hold the winning hand and achieve the human rights that we all deserve. I know I'm, going a little bit esoteric, but people think that, and I know we have to offer a real critique of capitalism, but I'm going to be frank, and I've said I have yet to see any form of socialism or communism not violate people's human rights too. It seems like all these systems created by white men have the same fundamental flaws. They don't center the people's needs in the frame, and so that's probably controversial to say right now, But I'm saying that we're going to have a post-capitalist and a post-communist vision for what we deserve, because all of these systems have ideals that they fail to live up to in terms of protecting people's human rights.
Well, yeah, Kwame, we haven't heard you. Go ahead, go ahead.
I agree with 99.9% of everything everybody said. Loretta, I would probably dissent on the communism. I don't see no communist countries out here. China is not communist. We already know North Korea ain't communist. Russia ain't communist. I think one of the main problems is that a lot of these countries has been reversed. And so we see why they practice the same practices as the United States imperialist power. You dig what I'm saying? China is one of the biggest polluters out here, you know, when they revolution was reversed in 1976. So I would just say, I would just dissent on that part. I feel like if we do get a socialist country again, that we can actually, the people can speak for themselves around these human rights, and the people can actually organize around it. But I would want to point out this. I read a piece recently by Ajamu when you was talking about the imperialists turning imperialist wars into and organizing anti-imperialist coalitions against them and stuff. I think that's one of the biggest destructions of the planet right now. We know the military industrial complex is one of the biggest polluters, you know what I mean, which is another indictment of how this capitalist imperialist system works. You know what I mean? I think these issues are interconnected. And if we lose sight of the interconnection of these issues, we won't be able to organize properly around this. But at the end of the day, we all agree we have to change the system. Like, it's not going to get better under capitalism. We all know that. You know what I'm saying? It's all about profit and exploitation of the environment and the people that labor within the world, you know, not just in the United States, but around the world. But these, if we look at these as interconnected, like Loretta said, it's not really a hierarchy in this, but if I would put one as being one that's gonna make us all have to be boots on the ground and actually focus on changing the system, I would probably say it is the climate situation, because if we don't have a planet to exist on, like, all this other stuff is gonna go out the window. This is why we always have to do political education around these issues. Recently, Guardian Rebellion, and I would say Scientific Rebellion, they recently had a protest around this, because I know a lot of people was paying attention that they the Democrats and Republicans and or the world leaders was having a conference around climate change and stuff, and they was out there, I want to say on the East Coast, disrupting it, them going over to that conference and stuff, you know what I mean? But one of the greatest things that we can do is take the legitimacy of this conversation out of the representatives of this this system, the Democratic Party and the Republican parties, particularly the Democratic Party. We should continually expose the contradictions that shows that they can never solve this issue. Their very system that they uphold is perpetuating and exacerbating this issue. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's one of the greatest things that revolutionaries can do. We got to take the legitimacy out of this conversation from the Democratic Party in particular, and bring it back to the people. You know what I'm saying? Because only we are really out here being exposing the real truths of what's going on out here. We can't allow Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Barack Obama to act like they're human rights upholders when we know they the biggest war criminals. They the most genocidal, the most warmongering of imperialists that's out here. You know what I'm saying? So that's something that we got to continually undermine when it comes to us waging this class ideological struggle of winning the people over to our side and recognizing their system would never solve this issue. You know what I'm saying? So we have to upend this system. I would just want to say one other thing. I want to send a special shout out to, I know a couple of my comrades on here, but I want to send a special shout out to my comrade Jorge Che Nieves. He's one of the Attica survivors and young lords that's on here today. Appreciate you joining us today, Elder.
All right. We got, was it 37? We got 37 minutes. A lot of questions popping off. So we're gonna cap responses at about 2 minutes because there's a million questions coming in right now. And I love it. It's excellent. See what we got next here. But I will cut you off though, is my point. So lovingly and respectfully. Let's see. So I had a question from Eric. This is for everyone on the panel. What are some methods, tools, or ideas to build solidarity in order to help shuttle along newly formed leftists or young revolutionaries down the ideological pipeline? Or what are some lessons learned in the past that can be used today? So if you want to respond, try to keep it to 2 minutes. I will cut you off.
My more recent work after more than 50 years in the movement has been calling in the calling out culture, because too many people who should be working together imagine that they're in a woke competition with each other. Well, I know this, I know how to use this language, I know how to, and you ain't woke enough, or you ain't, so busy criticizing everybody else's human rights practices that they fail to be self-critical of their own. And the thing I try to say to them with love, the fact that you think you're in a woke competition really reveals how unwoke you actually are. Because we need all these folks coming together. We can define the enemy. I fight fascism. If you're not an actual fascist, you may be my problematic ally, but I don't confuse those two things. And the fact that we can't do accurate threat assessments is going to keep us from building the power necessary to overcome the fascist movement, because that's how I define the anti-human rights movement.
Right on, Loretta. And under time. Anybody else, Cheri? Precision.
I think back when I was young and dumb. No. I think it's really important that we know who it is that we're dealing with. There's a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing. And I think that I remember from early on, I never pulled back the curtain to see where people were getting their money from. And I would highly encourage new people that enter the process. That I think it's really important to look at who you're up against, who's financing, the various different things that are happening. I know we had a bunch of folks that were not participating in some of the climate justice stuff here in Pennsylvania, and it's because they were receiving money from Shamako. But they had lots of other reasons why they said that they couldn't be involved. And the real reason is that they were taking some money from Shamako. So I think it's really important to really have a common estimate of what you're up against, who's financing them. I would love to just develop a plan and have a vision of what kind of world I'd like to live in. But I think it's also important that we teach new brothers and sisters that enter this process that they really have to prepare for, an enemy that doesn't care if we live or die. I know that since we're constantly organizing on the front line, that we're having to deal with some just horrible vultures that are incredibly dangerous. And so that's anywhere from like the police to the militarization of the police to lots of other efforts to just make us disappear. And not talking about that doesn't get us anywhere.
Ajamu, Kwame, 2 minutes, please.
I think both of Loretta and Cheri summed it up for me.
Word.
Ajamu, same?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
no, I think so. I think it as we begin to sort of filter all this stuff out, it raises more and more questions. Like, for example, some of the same people that claim to embrace human rights are also folks who will find a way to justify supporting the imperialist program of the U.S. state, be it wars in Ukraine or sanctions or whatever. And so all of these contradictions we have to really kind of deal with, because we have to deal with, because again, it's about vision, and it's not about oppressive Olympics or who's more woke. It's about things and values. And that is it's going to be a tough one too, because when push comes to shove, some of our friends, we're going to have to keep on moving beyond, because they're going to get stuck at a certain place. And so we struggle and we go as far as we can. I said earlier, it's time out right now for any kind of bullshit. That basically, if we don't have a radical vision we're trying to push, then basically we are doing the ideological dirty work of the enemy.
Word. Killing me sometimes, Java. All right. So we got a question from Anna in the audience. Please share your thoughts on how much this country progressed in the last 5 or 10 years on the issues that you've been fighting for. And Anna, I'm not sure, I don't want to make any assumptions, but I mean, I guess if it didn't progress, you should probably bring that up too. So I don't know if anyone wants to take that one. Oh, Cheri, got you.
Well, just real quickly, people always think that because in some of these circles we're known for moving families into houses, and I wouldn't say that we progressed in moving people just into houses, but I think what we've progressed in is we've helped to develop some pretty amazing leaders across this entire country that are able to, just figure out how to, build entire encampments or take over houses or do whatever they've got to do. But it's because they went through some pretty damn good boot camps over the years where people develop their own critical thinking skills and understand that the most successful thing at the end of the day, at least for us, is how many more leaders are we building to replace ourselves.
Word. Thank you, Cheri. Oh, go ahead, Loretta.
I don't know if I could use a timeline as short as 4 or 5 years, but I've been around. I got started activism when I was 16 years old in 1970. And when I started, I didn't think that we could change the apartheid system. In 1972 is when we started the first Rape Crisis Center. And we just celebrated our 50th anniversary last month. Yeah, when I first started in Washington, D.C., D.C. didn't have rent control. It does now. And so we are not privileged to be in charge of the universe's timeline. What we are privileged to do is serve the people as best that we can. And these small victories will accumulate and lead to big changes. You got to stop imagining that you're the entire chain of freedom. You just got to make sure the chain doesn't break at your link. That's your mission.
Thank you, Sister Loretta. Ajamu Kwame.
Yeah, I would second that. Like I think of things in terms of progress, but I look at it as the overall picture. It's a protracted struggle. You know what I mean? With every progress is also setbacks. You know, that's the dialectics of life. You know what I mean? But it's to keep on going. It's to keep on persevering. Just in my own within our own movement, that I feel like we was able to accomplish is bringing black and brown solidarity. That's been like something that I'm very proud of, that we've been able to promote. Recently, last week we had the Heartland Alliance protest up there in Chicago, where we went up there. A number of us went to support the Brown Berets. They've been struggling against this issue with the kids in cages. Heartland Alliances has been taking money from the federal government, but locking these kids in cages. Let's keep it 100. It's a concentration camp. It's a fascist policy they carrying out over a whole demographic of people that used to be their country. 55% of the West was a part of Mexico. You know, when they talk about Russia taking Ukraine and stuff like that, but your whole history has been about taking everybody else's property, land and stuff like that. You know, the border, those immigrants that came over here, the border, they didn't cross the border crossed them. You know what I'm saying? So building that black and brown solidarity has been important, because some of the fascists has been trying to divide the black and brown community. You know what I mean? So being able to bridge that gap and being a movement that's able to bridge that gap and work in intercommunal solidarity, I think that's something that I'm proud about. That I would say is something that came about within the last couple of years, that our movement can say we actually help forge ahead. But this is only, like Loretta said, one link in a whole long chain. Like, we not the ones that's been doing this forever. You know what I mean? But we are proud to keep up that protected struggle of others.
And briefly, I agree that it is a contradictory process. It's been a lot of progress, if you want to use that term, of success in terms of some of the changes in consciousness, in particular among young folks, who are much more clear and critical about the possibilities inherent in this system. They're not going to be sold on some notion of an American dream when they see all around them the contradictions. And so they're more open out to look at different ways of life, different ways of organizing societies. And that's a good thing, because that allows us to build. And that's what we've been trying to do with the Black Alliance for Peace. I mean, you know, our medium age right now is about 25 and a half. So we got a lot of young folks who are looking around, and they're coming into the fold and looking for formations that are unambiguously radical, because that's the terms of their life. This people are catching hell, and they don't have time for no bullshit. So, you know, I think that's a good thing.
So I want to acknowledge a couple of comments, and then we're coming to a close here. So we're going to do probably 2 more questions, and then give panelists an opportunity to give closing statements. So I got a comment from Veronica, who has been very interactive. Veronica, we see you. We appreciate you. Thank you all for your service and commitment towards the liberation of all oppressed peoples, and for the invitation to this presentation. In the words of the great Kwame Ture, only the organized masses will take us to our proper liberation. It's not any one great man or woman who will liberate us, but the organized masses. She goes on to say, I'm here to learn, serve, and build to win. Respectfully, Veronica Garcia, Texas State Chair for La Raza United Political Party. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. And then our next question, this is an easy one, but probably not an easy one. Do you support the right to a universal basic income? And obviously, why or why not? I'm gonna pick on somebody actually this time. Kwame, you've been going last a lot. We're gonna push you up to the front on this one. Why don't you go ahead and take that one, bro?
Okay, so do we support a universal base income?
Yes, sir.
I mean, I do, but I'm not one of those ones that's like focused on the economic reductionism that I see with certain movements and stuff. I definitely think even $15 an hour is not a good a good minimum wage. You know what I mean? I live in Indianapolis, probably one of the most cost-effective places in the whole United States, and $15 an hour is not going to be able to give you a standard of living that's going to be conducive to a human decent life. You know what I mean? I think people should get paid a lot more than that. You know what I mean? $25, you dig what I'm saying, would be just barely surviving in some places. You know, California, I went out to California a couple of weeks ago and bought a hamburger and a combo, and that was $20 was gone before you knew it out in California. So I definitely support universal, but I think we can't just limit it to economics, unionizing and economic organizing, labor organizing. It's a political, social, cultural context that this whole system has us wrapped up in and subjugated under. And economics is one of those factors, of many factors. Racism, colonialism, patriarchy, homophobia, all these issues are interconnected. But yeah, I think fighting, like standing with the railroad workers, you know what I mean? A lot of the stuff that I posted on there was speaking about solidarity with them. I know they're more high income paying individuals that make a lot more money than us, but standing in solidarity with them, I think is important. Go ahead.
You finished? Wrap it up.
That's all I was saying.
Okay, work. Brother Ajamu, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think that the ideal is good. I mean, the idea is suggestive that all human beings should have the ability to at least be able to subsist, to live at a certain level of culture, and that's we can agree with that. Whether or not that is going to be policy that will be the kind of reformist instrument that will be used by the capitalists as they are finding that the legitimacy of the system is crumbling around them remains to be seen. If we are able to have a reform like that really deals with the material reality that people are living and it ups it, that's a good thing. But as we said earlier, we don't get stuck at that level because basically we're not going to be able to provide to create an environment where people can live decent human life until we finally do away with this capitalist system. And while there may be no other models yet in place, the one thing we know is there's plenty of capitalism. There's really existing capitalism, and we see the consequence of it globally in massive poverty, in barbarity organized as society. And so we know we don't want more of that. We may not have a sense of how the future might look, but the one thing that people are getting hip to is time out for this shit. And they're prepared to struggle and die to eliminate it. I think that's a good thing.
Thank you, Brother Ajamu. Cheri.
Well, you know, I'm here with a bunch of folks from the Poor People's Army, and they would tell you that those stimulus checks taught us about universal basic income. They couldn't survive on those things, and they couldn't survive without them. I mean, you know, so, you know, I would just echo mostly everything that, you know, Ajamu just said, which is, yeah, maybe for a minute, but we're surrounding ourselves with young people and people that have tasted dirt too long. and they're ready for something totally brand new. They see the end coming, and they see it coming quick, and we're out of time. And so where maybe about, for some of us, maybe about 5-10 years ago, we'd be more focused on some policy stuff. Although we do a lot of that stuff tactically, we are serious about aligning ourselves with particularly young people from all ranks of life that are just done with a system that's killing everybody we love.
And Sister Loretta, you want to close out this question for us?
I think we have to do an and. I agree with Ajamu that we are, actually, I don't even think we have to bring down capitalism. The problems of capitalism is bringing its own self down. I mean, it's imploding from within in many ways, and it's hurting a lot of people. At the same time, we have to meet people's basic needs. There's no, we can't just be spouting ideology while people are starving on the street, don't have a place to go, getting battered, getting raped. I mean, we've got to take care of the people. If we don't center their needs in the middle of our analysis while we talk at the ideological level, to say that, as Ajamu would say, we have to do an and. And so I don't ever want us to say, no, we will not meet people's needs because it's reinforcing the capitalist system that we're trying to keep down. And at the same time, we're going to offer that critique of that capitalist system. We are able to hold both thoughts in our brains at the same time, because that is the contradiction at the nexus of which we work, that we have to meet people's needs at the same time. We critique the system that causes those needs to exist in the first place. We can do both.
Thank you, Sister Loretta. All right, so we're gonna do one last question, read some of the final comments, and then we're gonna have final statements. So
I thought you was gonna let Che speak on that, Shamako.
I what I told him was I wanted him to drop the comment, and then we would read the comments back. I want to be careful because I can't just open it up to him.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's no offense, but yeah, anyway. So but point for next time. Sorry, Che. My apologies. And last question. Hold on 1 second. Oh, that is not a question. It's a lot of comments. Just comments. Oh, I do need to make this note. Please don't forget to finance our side. Start with a contribution to the Poor People's Army. So there is a donation link. If you haven't hit it, please be sure to hit it. Oh, here we go. Okay. So what is the role of protests in the fight for human rights? So let's try to keep the responses at 2 minutes, and then as soon as we're done with the last response, we will go into closing statements. So anyone want to volunteer to take that one first?
I'll start off again since you said I'm always last. Well, it's just like what a lot of organizers in the past said: educate, organize, and agitate. All of them go hand in hand. Not only is it exposing contradictions of whatever you protesting around, but it's also a way to build relationships with people in the community, to build towards a movement that can actually coalesce to target some of these issues more in an organized manner. That's how I look at it. Some look at it different than that, but I think that's pretty much agitate or educate and organizing for future, because these are only battles of a larger war. And so I look at everything as being a protraction of something else, a transition to something else. So organizing to build something that can get people together around some of these issues, but also understanding the other issues that interconnect that people come out to protest around. My wife, like her sister's been missing for 3 years now. That's another issue that's not heard of a lot in our community. But when she comes out to these protests, that I give her a platform is to also connect other movements with other movements and see how these movements can work together to expose these contradictions together. You know what I mean? And work towards resolutions of these contradictions.
Thank you, sir. We're gonna popcorn this. Well, Cheri.
Yes, I mean, protest is important. They raise the contradictions in the process. They're good schools for learning. They're kind of like boot camp. But we also have to be careful these days because the Democratic Party has done a great job at creating diversion protests. And so many of our troops will get pulled into demonstrations and events that do nothing for the issues that they're fighting against or that they're engaged in their community. And some people just think that the way you do things is you show up at every protest. And that's not good at building leaders. That's not good process to build cadre. So be careful be careful to not be pulled into a lot of diversions, because the most important stuff you need to be involved in, you're not going to see it on the cover of Life magazine, the New Yorker, CNN, chances are, those kinds of things. You know, the demonstration at you know, in the neighborhood, on the corner, block by block, those kinds of things, chances are you're not going to know about those things. So yeah.
Thank you, Cheri. Ajamu.
Well, I think protest it can be important, is as long as Cheri says, that is part of a broader strategic plan. It can't just be about spontaneously reacting to everything that the system throws at you. But recognizing that mobilization is important. It helps to solidify organization, sometimes helps to build organization, but that the most important element of the work is in fact what happens between those public mobilizations, the organizing, the political education that takes place internally within the organization, and in the work that it's doing within its wherever it's operating geographically. So protest is important. We're going to fight for our rights. And that means, you know, obvious demonstrations, but everything that we do has to be done to facilitate the main objective, which is the organization of our people.
Thank you, Brother Ajamu. And Sister Loretta.
As I keep saying, I'm an and girl. There's no one set of strategies that's going to get us to the mountaintop. We got to take many different paths to that mountaintop. And I say that because I live in Georgia. You don't think getting out there and voting last week made a damn difference? People would say, well, that's too centrist, that's supporting Democrat. It's an and, you know, and I'm one of those people that don't criticize very much other people's activism, because by the fact that they are protesting, I don't call it performative, because I already know by the fact that they're showing up, the one thing I need to know about them, they ain't on the other side. You know, and you can use those kind of moments to see your potential for building a power base and stuff. If we stop dismissing people because they don't use the strategy we would prefer them to use. I really am saying that we got to get over ourselves, people, to build power, So you got to organize people at the church who believe in Jesus, and you got to organize people in the prison who don't. You got to organize people who show up for your protest, and you got to organize people who would never come out and protest. We've got to do it all, because we got to build that base. Organize is not just a dream, it's something you do every day using every strategy, everything in your toolkit to get people, a movement, is built of a whole lot of different people thinking a whole lot of different things, but they're moving in the same direction. But when a whole lot of people are thinking one thing and they're moving in the same direction, that's a cult. And we got to stop our cult building, our cult-like thinking that everybody got to do it all the same way in order for us to have power. You got to build that movement at every level and use every strategy. So I'll organize the day long, the 1 day a year protesters, and I'll organize the people who do the work every day. They're all our people, because however they show up, you get to know they ain't on the other side. Can't we tell the difference between them and the fascists?
All right, y'all. We are at the end of the second hour, so I want to give our panelists an opportunity to make a last statement. Try to keep it to, of course, 2 minutes. Cheri, we'll start with you.
Okay, so we want to let folks know that if you're interested, I was trying to text Galen during this. We are organizing I believe it's the 20th anniversary of the New Freedom Bus Tour that we took around the country to collect human rights documentation. We are going to be having a 20th anniversary, 25th, they corrected me. Damn, we're having our 25th anniversary of the New Freedom Bus Tour, collecting doing human rights documentation around the entire country. If people want to be a part of that, know more about it, hit us up. The other thing I just want to say is these are all amazing panelists. We love you all. We respect you. And there's a lot of amazing people that came to this thing today, too. I want to lift up Richard Monhay, amazing labor leader that's been in the forefront, helping around immigrant rights and labor issues for centuries. That's how old you are. We have the Poor People's Army has organizing classes every Monday night. We have them both in person and online. So if people are interested in going to any of our organizing schools. And then we also have boot camps where we do an in-depth training over a weekend or a week, whatever, if people are interested in coming to our boot camps. And then lastly, we have an international committee because we value linking relationships with our brothers and sisters around the world. So if anybody's interested in any of those things, and if you know groups of low-income homeless folks in your part of the country that wants to get out of the cold and learn how to do housing takeovers, reach out to us. We do educationals across the entire country.
Thank you, Sister Cheri. Brother Ajamu.
First, let me thank the organizers for this very important conversation. It's very important for us to come together and to grapple with these kinds of issues. As I keep saying, this is a moment unlike any other moment in history, and the history of this country in particular, because of what's at stake. We have leaders. We have a ruling class that basically has lost its mind, is dangerous, reckless. It is leading us toward situations where we could end up blowing up the entire planet. It really reflects the pathology of white supremacy, that they seem to be bent on the fact that if they are not able to run the world, they're going to blow it up before they give it up. So we have a task before us. That's why, I might sound a little strident or whatever, but, everything is strategic. and tactical. And right now, strategically, we got to have absolute ideological, political clarity. I mean, the ideological thing is going to be part of a struggle, but if we don't have front and center the commitment to radical social change, then basically we play right into the hands of the enemy. You know, reformism is good in terms of us being able to raise consciousness and to win concessions, but we've got to make sure that people understand that unless we take power from these criminals, these Western colonial capitalist criminals, and we've got to name who they are, unless we take power from them, and we don't have to deal with what might be the consequence of that, because I think that there's enough evidence to suggest that we can build new kinds of national relationships that are more based on cooperation than what we have today. But what's clear is if we don't take power from these criminals that still control the planet, then basically we all done. That is the task, that is our responsibility, and it's a struggle that we can't lose. So thank you.
Thank you, Brother Ajamu. Brother Kwame.
Yeah, I'm gonna first thank the Poor People's Army for inviting me on here as one of the panelists with all these distinguished other panelists. It's a pleasure to get to meet you, Ajamu, Loretta. I already know you, Cheri. I appreciate the work that y'all doing out here in the community, because everything, like Loretta said, all hands on deck. Like, we have to be out here, boots on the ground, working on whatever lane to organize the people for this change that must come. You dig what I'm saying? As Jabu just spoke on, let's name it for what it is. Like, it's capitalism, imperialism, it's white supremacy, it's fascism, it's colonialism, all these different things. That's the enemy. You dig what I'm saying? The people got to come to understand this is the enemy. I'm of the framework like Fred Hampton. I'm willing to organize with anybody that has revolution on their mind. No compromise with this system. We in an existential threat. Even before the Donald Trumps and the neo-fascists and Christo-fascists came to unveil what this country is about. It was already fascist. It was just had a bourgeois bourgeois electoral form of it, with some of these policies that's been carried out against our people, with police terrorism, mass incarceration. All those are a form of fascism, ICE detention. You dig what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, we have to keep on building this intercommunal solidarity, organizational solidarity with all the movements. And the Second Rainbow Coalition, as long as I chair this, I'm willing to work with anybody that has revolution on their mind. And I appreciate the work of all y'all comrades on here.
Sister Loretta?
I have learned that I can't do this work from a place of anger anymore. I have to do it from a place of love, because that's the only sustainable way to do it. I'm outraged at injustice, but I've learned not to be angry at the people I need to work with. I need to be pulling them in, having these conversations, even learning to change the language I use from a place of love. Because I'm not here to weaponize the words the people I need to organize don't even understand. I'm here to bring them in to building power to change what is. How did Angela say it? You know, I'm not ready to accept the world that I can't tolerate. I'm ready to change the world that I can't tolerate. And that requires having the same register that you can speak to Jaribu's people in Mississippi and the Delta that I would use in my academic classrooms. I have to be able to speak to all those people, and the common language to speak to them is from a place of love.
Wow. Thank you, Sister Loretta. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here. This has been an absolutely powerful discussion. Hopefully we'll get it up and online and available sometime in the next few days. So if folks want to share it to their networks, they can use it as a teaching tool. We want to thank everybody for coming out today. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Meditate deeply on these words, and we'll see you next time.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, everybody.
Love y'all.
No compromise, no retreat.
all
Practice
parts
the
of the
politics of love.
people.